Mr. President, when senators rise on this floor, typically we're identifying problems, we're talking about how to solve them, and we're talking about how prior actions haven't quite worked. Today, I have the pleasure of rising for the opposite reason, to talk about something that has worked, something that we did, something that we worked on together in a bipartisan basis that has made an enormous difference for the students of our country. In the spring of 2013, there was an impending deadline. The interest rate on student loans, which in the past had been set by statute by Congress without regard to what the underlying economics were at the time, what the borrowing rate of the federal government, but it was an arbitrary number set by Congress, was due to double. This was July of 2013, was due to double to 6.8%. There was a proposal put forward by the leadership and by the members on this side of the aisle which did not get sufficient votes. There was another proposal put forth by the representatives, by the senators on the other side of the aisle, which also didn't get enough votes. So we were left with a situation with no proposal on the floor and an impending deadline that would have doubled rates for student loans for millions of students across the country. At that point, a small group of us, bipartisan, got together and said there has to be a better way to find a solution here. We can't let this happen to our students. This is a particularly important time of the year to be talking about this because this is when students are finding out where they're going to college next year. They're making their arrangements for financial aid, and they're thinking about what is going to be their commitment. Well, as of today, as of this afternoon, as a matter of fact, those students are going to be able to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief because we just learned that the interest rate on student loans taken out for next year, based upon the cost of borrowing for the United States government, will be 3.76%, the lowest it's been in a decade, and considerably below, almost half of what it would have been had we not come to that solution on that hot summer day in the middle of the summer of 2013. Now, the group of people that worked on this and put it together were, as I said, a bipartisan group. Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, Senator Manchin, Senator Tom Coburn, my friend from Oklahoma, Senator Alexander, Senator Tom Carper, Senator Dick Durbin, and Senator Tom Harkin. We had a lot of meetings, we had a lot of discussions, we had a lot of negotiations, and ultimately worked together to determine a fair and equitable way to set the rate for student loans from the federal government based upon the federal government's own cost of borrowing money and combine the best ideas from both plans. We got the strong support of the President, who encouraged the Democratic members of our group to join in these negotiations, and we reached a consensus. The Bipartisan Student Loan Certainty Act, which passed this body with something like 80 votes. And that has made a real difference for our students. Here are some numbers. $50 billion, $5 billion, $277 billion. Those are the answers. What are the questions? The first is $50 billion is the amount of money that students will save over the next 10 years based upon the difference of what the interest rate would have been and what it's going to be. This says 3.8%. We made this yesterday. It's actually lower. It's 3.76. But this differential over 10 years equals $50 billion in the pockets of students across this country. $5 billion a year difference in what they will have to pay in interest and what they would have paid had the law not been changed. This is an enormous amount of money for our students. In the state of Maine, the New America Foundation has estimated that this translates into over $275 million in interest savings to students just in the state of Maine. Well, those are big numbers, 275 million, 50 billion, 5 billion. So what does it mean in reality to an individual student? And here's what we're talking about. Under the old law, an individual typical undergraduate would have paid $17,000 in interest as opposed to $10,000. That's $6,000 into the pockets of our students. That's going to make a real difference. Now, I'm delighted that we've had this success and that we've been able to report something that has actually been done right around here and that has truly benefited millions of students across this country. But we have plenty of work still to do. College is still too expensive. The burden of student debt generally is very heavy and weighs on not only the students but our economy. We need to reauthorize the Higher Education Act, and we need to enact meaningful changes in the whole structure of how colleges can keep their prices affordable and that we give students the tools they need to succeed. We also need to look at the structure of these of student loan programs to simplify A, how you apply, and B, how you pay them back, how the structure is, and have simple, easily understood techniques to pay back according to your means, according to what you're earning at the time, an earnings-based repayment schedule so that students don't exit college with this enormous burden. One student told me, "Senator, I feel like I have a mortgage but no house." And that's essentially what's happening. So what I'm talking about today is truly good news, but it's not the end of the story, and we should not say, well, we've taken care of that issue, let's move forward. But I do think every now and then it's important to acknowledge that occasionally the policies work out. And this is one that has worked out spectacularly for the students of America. $50 billion over the next 10 years will be saved by students who would otherwise be paying that money in interest, and that's money that they can invest in their own futures and can make a better life for themselves, their families, and our country. Mr. President, I appreciate the opportunity to acknowledge the work that was done by this entire body and by the House and by the President to resolve what would have been a true crisis for our students and to move it toward a much more manageable solution. I look forward to continuing to work on this issue and to keeping in touch with members, with Chairman Alexander, members of this body who are interested in continuing to work on this issue of the cost of college and how student loans are structured in order to make them work most effectively and fairly for the young people of this country.